Texas Tech with a lot of momentum the way they ended last season, and the expectations are there, as you can imagine. Year two, Joey McGuire shucked the quarterback, came back at the end of the year, looked really good doing it, but they have more than that. We're joined by Carlos Silva, Lubbock Avalanche-Journal on 365 Sports. Carlos, are the expectations near an all-time high?
I would think so, and thanks for having me on, guys. But I guess just when you look at what Texas Tech has coming back, you got 10 offensive starters coming back. You have 6 defensive starters coming back. You just have a lot of experience returning. And not only that, but Joey McGuire and his staff, including the recruiting guys that everyone talked about, James Blanchard and some of the other ones like Brian Nance, they're starting to get their feet under them and really kind of find the things that, they need, which last year, obviously, with Tyree Wilson going to the draft, they found a guy in Steve Linton out of Syracuse to hopefully fill up that edge rusher and pass rusher that they need. So I think there's just a lot of high expectations for Texas Tech just based on, Tyler Shuck coming back is certainly important, but you have a lot of weapons for him to utilize in the offense. And not only that, but then the defense, which certainly turned a corner as well, seems to be reloading as well.
How do you think they'll fix their problems on the road that they had, especially early in the season last year? Is that something just the coaching staff and experience will help out with?
Well, the interesting thing is if you look at most of the games minus the one blowout, I mean, you just kind of look at small little mistakes. You look at North Carolina State when they played them, interceptions, fumbles, bad field position. It's just small little things in the fundamentals that I think are somewhat fixable when you look at it from a, after the season perspective. They were in many of their games, and I think that's something to kind of look into as Texas Tech, again, improves on the defensive side and the offensive side. If they're able to, either run the football a little bit better now that their offensive line is shored up with some of the guys that were injured and kind of moving back and forth on the line. Now you've got some other guys that are coming in and, shoring up some spots that you weren't sure of last year. Maybe you run the football better. You milk the clock a lot more. The defense gets more stops or turnovers, or the take three, as Joey McGuire has talked about, with getting turnovers and, turning the momentum in their favor and getting more points or getting the offense a chance to score more points. I think that's something to look at, is just if they're playing more fundamentally sound, which is, I believe, what they did. Yes, Joey says toughness, West Texas stuff, but I think fundamentally, if they're able to play the way that they did last year, not get penalized, I think that's going to be the difference for them when they do play on the road. And I think you're going to see a little bit of a difference from Texas Tech going into this fall.
Well, let's talk about that O-line. How exactly has that O-line changed from last year? You mentioned some injuries, you mentioned attrition, things like that, just inexperience. How has that been addressed so far this offseason?
Well, I think the one big one is getting some guys that are very familiar with Steve Hamby out of Western Kentucky, Rusty Stats. I think he's going to be huge when you put him at the center position, especially when you look at Caleb Rogers at left tackle as well. He comes back and he's going to play very well. And then you get some depth with a Dennis Wilburn, who now can play pretty much anywhere on the line, and then Landon Peterson at depth as well. And then Monroe Mills, who's going to come back with 10 starts. I think, again, now that you feel like you have some guys with experience and you can, essentially pencil, maybe even use a pen to put some guys in, because last year there were just guys that were going left and right, first year, still trying to figure out, okay, are we going to have these guys for this week or next week? And if we don't necessarily have a guy that may play up to the level that we're needing at the starter position. And I think not only that, but then you saw them improve. So I think that's something else to take into account, is that some of these younger guys like a Landon Peterson or Dennis Wilburn, who, was a walk-on and really kind of stepped up and showed that he could play in the system. I think that's something to really look forward to for the offensive line, is now that you're getting some guys that you feel are going to, solidify those spots. And then if you're able to develop them just like you did last year down the stretch, I know it's cliche, but the sky's the limit for that offensive line going into this season.
Carlos, when the Big 12 schedule finally came out, was there anybody that you wish Texas Tech was playing that you're not? And is there any part of that schedule that probably kind of maybe caught your attention for a double take?
I don't know if there was a double take, but I think playing UCF was kind of interesting. I think it would have been interesting to get Texas Tech to play OU, but I think everyone wanted to play OU in Texas before they left the Big 12. So I think the Red Raider fan base was nice or was smiling when they saw that Texas Tech is going to be the last team that takes on Texas in Austin and on November the 24th. So I think that's certainly something. But I think the way that everything balanced out, I think it looks very well for Texas Tech to be, in that top 3, top 5 conversation, as they kind of would have been last year had they, again, going back to your all's point on the road, didn't play well, weren't able to, sneak out those victories because they played so well at home. And I think if you sneak out some of those road victories, you're going to get yourself in the Big 12 title chase conversation. So I think that's certainly something. But I think everything else kind of looks pretty good for them. I mean, you play a team in Kansas State that's been very difficult to play them. I think the one interesting one is going to be at BYU. That could be a difficult one when you guys talk about road games. You're going to play a team that's always, experienced, got some, older players there. So you're going to have to essentially be playing your best game on the road at BYU late in October. But I think everything else, kind of shakes out a little bit. You play, a UCF team that is going to be proving itself. You got at Kansas, which is, always tough, but then you still have Kansas. And I think just overall, I think the one big, game that's going to show how important or how, vital this team or players want to make this season is going to be when they host Oregon, especially when Tyler Shuck goes against his former team. I certainly think he'll be wanting to play that game, but I think that's going to be a huge litmus test for the Red Raiders.
Do you think this team has the depth to withstand injuries down the line? And that's because that's also what it takes to win the title.
I think they're a lot deeper than they were last year, which is saying something considering you had 3 quarterbacks play about 3 games last year or start 3 games. Obviously, you don't have one of them in Donovan Smith, who they will likely be playing against on September the 30th when Houston travels to Lubbock. But I think when you look at Baron Morton and Tyler Shuck, you've got 2 guys that have won you some Big 12 games that have that experience. And not only that, but then you got a guy in Jake Strong, a freshman that could certainly be what Baron Morton was, and same thing with Donovan Smith. 2 guys that are, in the system, kind of understand it a little bit and can, really swing the football. So I think that the most important part of it is you've got 2 guys in Baron Morton and Tyler Shuck who are going to be a lot more less injury prone than they were last year because they made sure that they did that during the offseason to help themselves, be more ready to, take some hits and, make sure that they're not going to put themselves in any danger of being out of the lineup. And going back to what I was talking about with the offensive line and the defense as well, you got some guys not only coming back, but then you've got some younger guys to help out. If you're looking to fill the void of a Tyree Wilson or a Krishan Merriweather at linebacker or a Marquise Waters at defensive back, you've got a Tyler Owens or you've got, a Tyreek Matthews or some of these other guys that are kind of playing here looking to, essentially, stand out as they couldn't last year because there was so much competition to actually make the starting lineup last year.
Good Lord, Tyler Owens still has eligibility. I feel like he's been in college.
Yeah, he does.
God.
Yeah, he does.
I feel like he's been in college for a long time, but that's just kind of the case all around the country, isn't it? With that COVID year, everybody's got some form of that or another. But, man, Carlos, when we talked to you throughout the season, there was this building excitement, and then, obviously Joey McGuire just being the enthusiastic guy that he is, that caught on quickly, and then you start winning games, and it piles up. There's the facilities that are underway. Can you kind of just give us the large scope of sort of where the excitement level for the fan base is right now and just kind of all the goings-on in terms of what's surrounding the football program?
Well, I think you can even go back the year before Joey McGuire where it was Sonny Cumbie, the former quarterback from Snyder that, stepped up and turned into a scholarship player for Texas Tech. He got Texas Tech its first bowl victory in forever, and he kind of started the momentum. He started the pump jack mentality, and Joey McGuire's just kind of run with it, going into that West Texas tough and being the hardest, toughest, hardworking team. He's really kind of built that, and the fact that you've got 2 bowl wins back-to-back against 2 really good teams, Mississippi State and Ole Miss, 2 teams that are from the SEC. You got 2 victories there, and that's certainly going to, fire up the fan base. And along with that, you've got a lot of really good recruits that are, at least looking at Texas Tech. I think there's a lot of positive momentum for Texas Tech in that sense from a personnel standpoint. And as you mentioned, from an off-the-field standpoint, they've got a lot of facilities coming in, which is probably the best thing for Texas Tech, because at this point, there's a lot of places that aren't necessarily building things anymore. The arms race was the last, 5 years or so, and Texas Tech kind of waited their time. And now that they're kind of doing that, maybe they will have one of the top facilities in the country when everything is said and done and they're built in the next couple of years. So I think in that sense, they've got that advantage there with their $200 million or $220 million. They just added that for their Southeast End Zone project. But it's just a lot of things that are going well for Texas Tech and Joey McGuire. It's just, again, going back to what you guys were talking about. Can you continue that momentum with, I think it's still a very tough schedule that they have, especially, like I said, when you have Oregon at home. How will that happen? If you're able to get a victory over them, then that could potentially be a team that gets you ranked at that point.
All right, Carlos, rapid fire real quickly from a couple of chat questions. One, is Taj Brooks the undisputed running back? I know they don't put up huge numbers rushing, but, man, he sure is a tough kid to bring down.
I think there are several guys there, and I think it's kind of the way that either college football or even NFL football is going. You try and look for 3 or 4 guys that can handle the load, 3 guys that are different. So you look at a Taj Brooks, he's the bowling ball, as Joey McGuire talks about him. Then you've got Cameron Valdez, who's another interesting prospect that has been doing some great things. And, of course, you've got other guys that can also do that as well. But, again, going back to what I was talking about, the offensive line, I think that's going to be the difference for Texas Tech is can that offensive line create some running range for those guys? Because if they are, they've got plenty of talent at the running back position when you look at some of those guys, especially starting with Taj Brooks, who I thought was playing his best ball. And then you look at some of the other guys like, Anquan Willis, a freshman that hopefully can kind of get his feet a little bit wet. And Bryson Donnell, who was injured a lot of last year, but showed some sparks in some games when he was able to play at the end. So I think you've got a lot of things to go there. And I know that wasn't rapid, but hopefully that kind of answers that question for that person.
That's okay. Donnell came from Legacy High School, and Tyler, a heck of a player. Also, one more thing. We had a question from Kim. He's a Tech fan. Anything on Kosi Eldridge yet? I'm not sure exactly. Is there a status on him or something?
So he is looking to potentially get back. There's an eligibility issue with him because of the way that he had played at junior college. There is a potential that he could come back. So that would be a huge get for Texas Tech, as he would obviously bring some experience as he played last year. One of your top tacklers, but right now they're still in the process. The last time we had spoken to Joey McGuire, that was the word that he had gave is that they're still waiting word on his eligibility status right now.
Carlos, thank you as always. Appreciate your time on Tech. Carlos Silva Jr., Lubbock Avalanche-Journal with us on 365 Sports. We're about to hear from